Hello, friends. I'm Kush Khandelwal, and this is Ageless Athlete. A few years ago, I started asking questions that would not leave me alone. Why do some people keep pushing mentally, physically, spiritually long after others burn out or break down? What does it really mean to age well when you still crave movement, meaning, and mastery? This show is my search for answers. Each week, I talk to elite athletes, everyday adventurers, and pioneering researchers who are stretching the limits of what's possible across age, injury, illness, and self doubt. You will hear hard won lessons, untold stories, and science backed strategies for building a body and mindset that lasts. For those of us joining for the first time, welcome to the show. For the rest, thank you for joining us again. Time is our most valuable asset, and I deeply appreciate you giving me your time today.
Imagine reaching your physical peak not in your 20s, not in your 30s, but closer to 50. And imagine doing your hardest climb on the rocks so unforgiven that a single mistake could end in catastrophe. And all of this while raising a family, coaching elite athletes, and carrying the weight of decades of expectation. Neil Gresham has lived that story. I have been a fan of Neil for a very long time. Back in the early 2000s, when I was just starting to climb and trying to figure out how to train, I remember devouring Neil's training articles, one of the few trusting voices in a still young sport. So sitting down with him now, gosh, years later, felt like coming full circle. So our conversation begins with Lexicon, this famous, or shall I say, infamous elite level climb that Neil sent just a few years ago. And then he later belayed Adam Ondra on for one of the boldest flash ascents in history. If you are not a climber, hang tight. Yes, while we go deep into the technical details of the climb, the process, and the story, this story isn't just about holes and grades. It's about boldness, timing, identity, and the razor thin line between risk and mastery. The second half of the conversation, that is where things open up. Neil shares the training shifts that helped him climb stronger in his 40s than in his 20s. We unpack aging as an athlete, the nutrition approach that helped him recover faster in his 50s, and what he's learned from coaching athletes well into their 70s.
I'm a little bit keto at the moment, so I had eggs for breakfast and a keto coffee with MCT oil and a bit of butter blended in. It was really nice. Sounds disgusting, doesn't it? But I know there's going to be plenty of people listening to this who know what I'm talking about. That comment's designed for
Well,
them.
I love my eggs, and I can force myself to eat my eggs without some kind of starch on the side. But I feel my coffee is kind of sacrosanct, so I don't even
Absolutely.
like people adding milk, or creamer.
Oh,
So
I see what you mean. It's just got to be straight. No ingredients, just black coffee.
I mean, good coffee is the best ingredient. So if you get good
Yeah,
coffee and
true.
I don't know if you make it right, but whatever you're doing with your breakfast, Neil, obviously it's working for you, and there are takeaways in some form for the rest of us.
No, don't have takeaways. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, that's not what you meant. Yeah, well, I mean, where do we start? Nutrition's clearly an important aspect, and the older you get, the more important it gets. It doesn't seem to matter much in your youth, does it? I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure it does.
Yes,
If you're
your
going to get
son.
if you're
Yeah,
going to get on the podium, oh, don't talk about my son's nutrition. Let's not get started on that. Like the toughest part of parenting is getting them to eat nice stuff and using reverse psychology and all that sort of thing. But no, I mean, I just think in my younger years, you know, I think when you've got, I mean, as a male athlete, testosterone like coursing through your system, you know, that's your main rocket fuel, isn't it? But then when the count starts to lower, that's when you got to have some hacks up your sleeve, isn't it?
well, we are eager to get a peek into some of these hacks that you have l- refined over the years. Also, where are you this morning or
Oh,
this
actually,
evening, actually, because you are in the
physically, where am
UK?
I? Yeah, I'm at home in Kendal.
Yes.
I am. Yeah, I've been
And
living here
Kendall
for the
is,
last.
I'm not familiar with. Okay.
Kendal's in the northwest of the UK. It's the Lake District. I've been living here for the last 10 years, but I've lived all over the UK. Really, I'm from London. I lived in Sheffield, like most up and coming aspiring British climbers do at some point. I lived there for 12 years. I lived in North Wales for a little bit, but I've settled here in the Lake District.
Got it. Normally when I ask people where they live, I think people will just broadly use the term the Lake District, and you were kind enough to be more specific, and I could not catch on to the name of the town.
Yeah, sure.
Neil, I just want to jump right into this, and I want to talk about Lexicon. And when we
Oh,
were
crumbs.
trying to set this together, I didn't think that that's where our conversation would begin. But
You're going to
we've just
begin at
had
the
this.
end. You're going to begin at the end of my climbing career. I said after that I wasn't going to
It
climb
is
anything hard, didn't I? And I've stuck to that.
well, Neil. I mean, we're lucky to have you on this podcast, not just as an athlete, but also as somebody who's coached, mentored, and is inspiring generations of climbers.
Thank
And
you.
you just inspired somebody who a lot of people believe is perhaps, yeah, the greatest or one of the greatest of all times. So you just belayed Adam Ondra on this kind of genre defying ascent of the climb. But many people listening, they are not even climbers, right? Because this podcast covers different outdoor sports. So
Okay.
would love us, love it if you would behoove us and tell us about what is Lexicon and why is this such a sought after climb?
Wow. How long have we got? This could be a one answer question that goes on an hour.
Let's put it this way. Let's say let's pretend you were on an elevator going up 20 stories, and then
Okay.
somebody had like a minute or two,
Okay.
maybe.
Well, climbing's an odd sport, isn't it? We see veteran athletes hitting personal bests in their later years because there's so much more to climbing than just raw strength and what you've got in the tank. There is so much scope for using, skill, tactics, nerve, head game to and sort of good movement, good technique to get the best out of yourself. So I hit a bit of a renaissance in the last sort of 10 years of my climbing between the age of sort of between my early 40s up to the age of, well, 50 when I did Lexicon. And as a result of so many things, I mean, it's a separate conversation, but improved nutrition, improved training strategies, it just like refining my game using the kind of marginal gains type approach. I ended up climbing my hardest sport routes I did my first 8C at the age of 45, and then my first 8C plus at the age of 47. And this was something I never expected as an athlete. I mean, why would you? You know, in fact, I'd considered when I turned 40 that I'd had my best days, but the truth was that I'd hardly got started. Now, there was something else, was that in my younger years, certainly the way I started climbing was doing what's called traditional climbing, which is when you have to place natural protection. You're reliant on cracks in the rock in order to secure yourself. And when I started climbing, that was the norm. That was the kind of stuff. That was the type of climbing that we were all brought up on. These days, it's regarded as something of an offshoot, almost a bit esoteric, and it's also misunderstood quite widely. A lot of people think, oh, that's crazy, that's dangerous, you'd have to have a death wish to do that. So-called trad climbing can actually be quite safe, but it can also be quite dangerous too. The risk level varies constantly in trad climbing. That's in the nature of it. Now, having had this bit of a surge with my sport climbing, I decided to get back into trad because I kind of gave it up in my early 30s because I pushed it and pushed it and pushed it. And to be honest, it was starting to become a bit of a dice game. And I reached that point. In fact, it was when I got married in 2002. And I was like, I'm not going to push my trad climbing anymore. I've had the best of this. So I kind of gave it up. But then this surge that I had in my sport climbing in my 40s made me think, well, what if I went back to trad? Now that I'm a stronger, fitter, more technical climber, you know, could I push my trad again? And sure enough, living in the Lake District, that was the perfect opportunity for that. And I started off looking around in the Lake District for new lines, for unclimbed routes to do. I did a couple of new routes that were equally as hard as the routes that I climbed in my 20s and early 30s, like an E9 and an E10. And I had this feeling that everything was kind of escalating. You know, not only was I improving in my climbing, but of course you have to find the right projects, the right challenges that are a kind of a sounding board for your methodology. You know, like, okay, I'm feeling like I'm climbing better, but I need the vehicle to kind of prove that to myself. And sure enough, the routes just kept coming. And we say sometimes in climbing that you don't so much pick your projects, they pick you. And that was when I found, when I was up on this crag in the Lake District called Pavey Arc, I saw this unclimbed line, the line which became Lexicon. I'd gone up there with a friend of mine, a young Lake District climber called Anna Taylor. We'd gone up there just for like normal days climbing, and I saw this incredible new route, and I just thought, wow, that looks amazing. And the process of new routing, for those listeners who are not so familiar, is you see this piece of rock, you realize, you work out from the guidebook that no one's climbed it, and then you have to try and establish if it's possible to be climbed at all. You know, maybe no one's climbed it for a reason, maybe it's got no holds on it or whatever it might be. So first of all, you have to sort of brush. There's a lot of lichen on the rock, and I sort of brushed it off, and I found that these really small, like tiny little crimpy holes going all the way up. The lower part of the route had already been climbed, but then the upper part of the route was the kind of new section. And the thing that jumped out straight away was that there was what we call a run out, which is when you kind of run out of protection. There's no further place to secure yourself, and you have to climb further and further and further and further above your protection, meaning that the further you climb, the further you're going to fall. And this culminates in this kind of sort of make or break section where you've got some very difficult climbing, and if you were to mess it up, you'd fall the entire length of the wall, and you may or may not hit the ground. So this was the kind of the point on the route that, you know, I realized that you'd have to just do everything in your power to not fall off this final last move. So I set about training, and the route felt like it was an opportunity for me to put into practice. The deeper I got into this project, the more I kind of felt that the planets had aligned for me, that this was the moment in my entire climbing career, the moment in my entire life when I had that this was my big opportunity, this was my chance. And the thought of actually backing away and not going for this route never crossed my mind. It was more a matter of when I was going to be ready. And it's a strange feeling being drawn in like that. You know, I'm sure any athlete that's approaching a big tournament, a competition, a fight, the Olympic Games, you just have, you know that at some point in the near future, you're going to be stepping forward to meet the kind of ultimate challenge, and you're going to have to deliver. And that was the feeling that I got with Lexicon. And I felt like I said, that every, not just every positive experience where I've been successful, but every experience when I failed and learned, you know, it was all channeled into this. It was the perfect level for me in terms of, if it had been fractionally physically harder, this piece of rock, which is it's just a random piece of rock sculpted by glaciers and the elements, right? You know, it's not like a competition climb that's been made by route setters to be a certain level, but it just so happened that this piece of rock was the perfect level to challenge me physically. If it had been any harder, I wouldn't have been able to do it. If it had been any easier, it might have been more of a done deal. And similarly, the danger level, if it had been any safer, it would have been, well, you know, not something to get too worked up about and not something to lose sleep over. If it had been any more dangerous, I wouldn't have gone for it, because, you know, I intend to enjoy a retirement in climbing, and I've got young children, and there's a certain point beyond which I won't go in terms of the risk level in climbing. And Lexicon was right on the cusp of that. I mean, some people would look at that and go, well, hey, he did that as a father of two. He must be a pretty foolish, reckless, irresponsible individual. Some people would think that, and they would be entitled to their point of view. Other people who know the game a little bit more and understand how we approach these routes and how we prepare might say, yeah, I get that. It's on the limit, but I understand it. But yeah, for me, I had to ask some tough questions. You know, was I prepared to go through with this? Sure enough, I did go through with it. I did complete the climb. And I just had this immediate sense of, I actually can't describe the sense of relief, because climbers are, I'm sure like most other athletes, inherently dissatisfied. You know, as soon as you do something, it's like, I need to do something else. You know, I've done something hard. Oh yeah, but I can do something harder. Or maybe I can. What's the next thing going to be? What's the next thing? And you're constantly looking forward to your next hit, your next challenge, and you're constantly wanting to better yourself, push yourself. But the minute I climbed Lexicon, that collapsed. That all just fell away. And I was like, that was it. That was my big one, you know. And I've seen some Olympic athletes talk like this. You know, they know that it's their last big shot. They get on the podium, they finish with a gold, and they're like, okay, you know. But sometimes they completely quit. Now I haven't. Now the great thing about climbing is it's not all or nothing. You don't only have to do routes like Lexicon. You can just drop the bar a little bit, or quite a lot, in fact, and still cruise around and enjoy it. And I would say that's the phase that I'm in at the moment. And you kind of asked me where I was at the moment. I think you meant physically, as in, I'm in Kendal in the Lake District, but where I'm at kind of more metaphorically with my climbing is I'm just enjoying not having some epic mega project that's just burning away at my conscience. And you know, like, these things, when we do them, they are a source of like stress. I mean, but it's positive stress. It's self-induced positive stress. Nonetheless, it's a source of stress. I feel like I've had that type of stress on my shoulders my whole life, and I've put it there, you know. But now it's pretty nice. It's quite cathartic to just go, oh yeah, well, I'm still climbing, but you know what? I'm not going to say that it's become more like a hobby, because that's just not true. But it's just, I'm a lot more chilled and a lot more flexible about what I do at the moment, and it feels pretty good. But that's hopefully answering that. That's my story with regards to Lexicon. I think you were also interested to know about Adam Ondra and how he's fitted into things. Is that right?
Yes, yes. And before we go in there, thanks for sharing the beginnings of the story. And you left a few different breadcrumbs for us, Neil, on things I want to ask you about. But before I go too deep, for those of us who don't know about you, uh, you threw some clues already. But can you tell us who are you and what do you do?
Oh, right. Okay. Well, I'm a, I'm a professional climber. I've been a pro climber for, well, half my life, over just over 25 years. And I do a variety of different styles of climbing. I don't do Himalayan mountaineering or high alpine climbing, but I do sport rock climbing, traditional rock climbing. I do something called deep water soloing, which is when you climb on sea cliffs without ropes and you fall off into the water. And I do ice climbing in the winter, like as in frozen waterfalls with ice axes and crampons and ice screws, but not high altitude stuff. And I'm a, and well, you've already said I'm a coach. And I've been a coach like for a very long time, for over 30 years.
Yes, you wear a few different hats, but first and foremost, I wanted to just quickly talk about this part of new route discovery before we move on and forget about it. And what I find so remarkable, Neil, is like you found this line, and
Hmm.
this is not, I don't know, this is not part of like the endless cliffs of Southern Europe, maybe. Uh, the cliffs of England see a lot of climbers and a lot of
That's right.
traffic. So you managed to spot this line, and you talked about beautifully on how it has to meet these criteria:
Hmm.
safety, uh, yeah, safety and risk level, also difficulty
Technical
level.
difficulty, correct? Yes.
Yes, yes. So curious. Okay, so when you were out there looking for scouting for new lines, were you just simply trying to find like a nice, or was there like sort of this deep like desire to find
Yeah,
this
yeah.
one line that
Uh,
you
yeah,
know?
I wanted to find the ultimate line. Yeah, I wasn't just out to find. I mean, I've found sometimes I've found climbs before that are too hard for me, and I've passed them on to your good friend and former guest on this show, Steve McClure. I hope, yeah, he's like if the piece of rock turned out to be too difficult for me, it could well be climbed by someone else, and that's happened before. But and sometimes conversely, they can turn out to be a bit too easy. And I mean, they're still fun to climb, but you just think, well, that wasn't really much of a challenge. But I was looking for something that was going to just be at my absolute physical and psychological limit. And the chances of finding that, and also but it's got to be good as well. The quality's got to be there. You don't want to climb something that's like poor quality rock, like loose holds, a bit dirty and scrappy. You want to climb like a really beautiful piece of rock with like amazing, elegant, fluid movements. And I found it. And I mean, I'm not a particularly religious person, but the chances of that thing appearing in front of my eyes at the time in my life when I was looking for it and ready, and things change. I mean, I've had some difficulties in the family the last couple of years of bereavement, family members being unwell, the need to actually relaunch my business. Your circumstances change. And the fact that Lexicon was there then at a time when I was able to do it, because if it appeared now, I actually wouldn't be able to commit to it because there's other stuff going on in my private life that is more important than climbing. So I feel I just feel incredibly fortunate.
Your level of let's say, delight and contentment cannot be overstated because you found this line maybe at the right time of your career where you still had the appetite to go after a goal, maybe just as audacious as this. And you were able to make the capacity available. And I'm, yeah, in many ways, this is like not dissimilar than somebody who's maybe preparing for, let's say, an Olympic medal, and they may have just this shot in this one time window. And that's what it takes to go after a goal like this. And then there's this other kind of pressure as well, right? Because, you know, Steve McClure, who you just mentioned,
Hmm.
and other
Hmm.
accomplished warriors at that level were probably also chomping at the bits because everybody wants to claim that prized first ascent. And I know that there is great camaraderie amongst you, but I'm sure there's some pressure that this thing is not going to wait around forever. You have discovered it, people
That's
know
right.
about it.
Well, there is great help. The good thing is that wasn't something that was concerning me, because the only people who would have been capable of taking that line off me were just really good friends, people like Steve, who just wouldn't have done it. There was one or two people who might have liked to have done, and I wouldn't have trusted them, but they weren't good enough to climb it. So, you know, it was that side of things was okay. But yeah, I mean, climbing does differ from other sports when you've got that side of things. I wonder if there's an equivalent in other sports. I don't know, but in the
Sure.
past, it's been a concern. You know, I've been trying a new route and thinking, is someone else going to come in and do this? But that wasn't a concern with Lexicon.
Of late, the UK has been producing this incredible new legion of climbers, maybe more in the modern, like sport climbing, bouldering genres. So, yeah, maybe fortunately for you, they hadn't yet arrived or turned their sights onto
Well,
your
exactly.
route. And
But you
so,
see,
yes, you
there's these, yeah. I mean, there's plenty who are strong enough, and that's where we're at these days in climbing. I mean, you know, young and old. That there's plenty who are strong enough, but Lexicon's much more about keeping your head together, you know, and you can't go and we're also in an age where, you know, everything's got to be quick and immediate, isn't it? And, you know, some people who have the genetics and the know-how and the motivation can get strong incredibly quickly, especially kids. You know, before you know it, they're doing boulder problems that are twice as hard as anything I've ever done. But the kind of what we call boldness in climbing, you know, the ability to cope with the pressure or the danger and the threat of a fall, and, you know, just to kind of block it out and stay focused on the task at hand. That's something that's built up over many years of practice. And, you know, I think these days we're seeing a lot of people just not having the time. You're not being able to put the time into that. But it's also gone out of fashion. You know, I don't think it's when youngsters get into climbing now, they talk about strength, they talk about technique, they talk about endurance. I don't think they talk about being bold. It's just not even a. It's almost just being cancelled as a component of climbing performance in the new generation. You know, rightly or wrongly.
yeah, interesting observation there. Well, I don't want to dwell on the entirety of the
Obviously I'm
climb.
generalizing. Of course, sorry
Sure,
to
sure.
interrupt, but there are exceptions. Of course,
Of
I'm
course.
making sweeping statements here. But but carry on.
Of course. Well, like I was saying, I don't want to take all our time today, so much to cover with you, and just talk about this one climb. One thing I will certainly encourage people listening or watching is to go watch the excellently made movie about your ascent, the whole story on Vimeo. I actually watched it last night. I somehow, yeah, I followed the arc over the years. Somehow I hadn't actually watched that particular video, so I went and watched it last night. It is so well made. And I think it also captures the drama and the the boldness you speak of, the kind of falls that people who are trying it are taking. Yeah, I think seeing is believing in this case. I want to, yeah, move forward a little bit. Still staying with that climb though. So Adam Ondra just came and did this flash ascent of the route,
Mm-hmm.
an ascent that you, I believe, were closely engaged in.
Yeah,
So
very much
can you
so.
take us to the story of how did Adam come into the scene, and how did you become this supporter?
So yeah, after climbing Lexicon, it got me thinking whether climbing had evolved to such a level where someone would be capable of flashing a route like that. And as said before, there's so many strong climbers around, but who would have the level of boldness as well as the skill and the strength? That climber would have to be the ultimate all-round package. And I was thinking about this person and thinking, yeah, maybe they're strong enough. Maybe this person, maybe they're brave enough, but they're not strong enough. And I'm whittling away all the options. And then, of course, the only person left on my list is Ad. But obviously I'm not going to blow my cool and like constant because I have climbed with him. He's a really, really good guy. I know the reason I reached that conclusion is because I've seen him climb myself. I've been riding on routes in the UK, traveling sport routes. I know how good he is. But I'm not going to like ring him up and go, Adam, come and try my route, or even send him a message to that effect. But rather like, it was such not a mad coincidence that I found Lexicon. Maybe it was just destiny, fate, the planets aligning. There was another element of that. I had thought strongly that it would be this amazing, amazing thing if Adam came over to the UK to try and sack Lexicon. But it's like, yeah, what are the chances of him without me contacting him? What are the chances of him deciding that would be a cool thing to do? And then I got the message from him. I mean,
Oh
it's
wow! So
bizarre.
you were you were actively uh, thinking
I was
about
totally
some,
thinking about it. Oh yeah, I was
wow.
totally thinking
Okay,
about it. But like,
because you
it's just
because Lexicon has seen maybe a few odd ascents
that's right,
since then,
right?
a
But
handful,
people,
but
yeah,
hasn't seen. So you hadn't seen like a flash ascent. So in your
exactly,
mind,
exactly. So it was done by Steve McClure, Dave McLeod, Matt Wright, and James Pearson, all who either top roped it or checked it out on an Absar road, before doing it. So it hadn't been flashed, but I thought, and it was in a way, like, why would I even think that? Because E11 is so beyond the current flash level in trad that the reason I thought it was because, climbers like Adam haven't yet got round to it. There's no one in the UK operating it anywhere near that standard. But it was just a matter of convincing, or not. And this is the point. I was never going to play the game of trying to convince Adam because it's just not cool. I mean, Adam gets people, Adam gets people saying all the time, "Come here, Adam. Come there. Do this, Adam. Do that." And like, he's a guy who makes up his own mind what he does. He's not going to like. In fact, if you ask him to come and try your route, it's probably going to be the kiss of death. He's going to go, "No, I'm not bothered about that." Or he's going to be like, "Sorry, I'm too busy," or something else. He decides his own path, right? But I'd been totally thinking about this. It's like, I know Adam could flash it. I know he's got a really good chance of it. And then I just got this WhatsApp message from him. Could I read it to you?
oh yeah.
Um, don't know, maybe we should. Yeah, I don't see any reason why not. Adam Ondra. Well, there's quite a lot of correspondence here where we're talking about this and that to do with the route. There we go. Hello. Hey, let me just check it's okay for me to read this before I do. Hey, Neil, I hope you're doing well. I'm thinking of making a trip to the UK and I'm very keen to try Lexicon. Are you at home midday? Maybe sorry, are you at home mid-May? Would you be psyched to join me?
Yeah,
You know?
Adam, the student, and yeah, just this devotee of the sport. Just
Absolutely. He knows it's a
yeah,
boot when he sees one.
yeah.
You
No, it's
know,
it's incredible, and I mean, there aren't many people who can, you know, I don't know, climb 15D. Uh, Nobody actually, and then do a Boulder V17, then have both I mean, the competence and the desire, right, to want to commit to this task.
so the thing is, all the previous ascensionists, as I say, had worked it on a road, okay, or checked it out on Absat at the very least. Now, Adam doesn't say in that message, I want to come to the UK and try and flash Lexicon, does he? He just says, I want to come and try it. But of course, I know what he's thinking. It's obvious that he wants to try and flash it. That's what he's trying to do. And it was not even something that we had to discuss. Like, it was just, until it got down to actually discussing the nuances of the route and the strategy, it was clear that he was going to try and flash it. That was the obvious challenge for him. I mean, it's already been done by, 4 others. It's like, well, he's got to raise the bar, hasn't he?
No, 100%. I mean, you saw right through his intent. I've been thinking a lot about energy, not just in training, but in recovery, in focus, in how we age. So when I came across NutriSense, it hit home. It's a program that pairs a 24 by 7 glucose biosensor with a dedicated dietitian to help you understand how your body responds to food, stress, sleep, and movement, and then act on the data. I chose it because I wanted something real, not another hack or one size fits all plan, just honest insight into what's actually going on inside me and how to build habits that last. NutriSense has helped over 150,000 people take that step. And if you want to try it, you can get 33% off your first month with code Ageless15 at nutrisense.io. Again, that's nutrisense.io, code Ageless15. You can also find this information on the show notes for this episode.
Yeah, of
Uh,
course.
Take us to that day, Neil. Take us to the day at some, I mean, you obviously uh, escorted him, showed him the climb, gave him all the information he needed, likely, but maybe not anymore. So share with us how that took place, and then take us to the moment where you were getting ready to belay him. I believe you did belay him on that climb.
I did. I did. Well, it's it's a strange game, this game of like hard elite trad climbing. And it can be hard to find belays, especially these days, with the consequences as they could be. But it's one of those things, it's a little bit like people who run ultra marathons, who it requires volunteers to turn up and man the checkpoints, doesn't it? It's like if you're a trad climber yourself and people have belayed you, then you have to return the favor and belay others. And, you know, I'm not going to, if Adam's saying that he wants to try my route, really, to be honest, I'm one of the best people, if not the best person to belay him on it, because the margins of of holding this fall are so slim. If you put too much slack in the rope, the climber's going to hit the ground. But if you keep the rope too tight, you're going to pull the climber off. It's a really, really critical belay. And I've got some experience there because I belayed Steve, and Steve, of course, fell off, and I managed to catch Steve 2 meters off the ground. And also I know the moves. I know, like I know where the protection goes. Of course I was an obvious candidate to belay at. But the other weird thing is that he didn't actually ask me. It was like, again, it was sort of an understanding between us that, yeah, of course I'm going to do this, And also something that we do is, again, some might argue this is like self-delusion. This is a little bit, reckless or something, but in the game of bold crab, you have to exude confidence. And if you're the climber, you have to believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, then you're playing a very dangerous game indeed. And it's like, you have to like kind of understand the risks, embrace the risks, but yet be confident in your ability to deal with them. And you have to do the same as a belayer. Now, once, kind of twice, but certainly once, I went to do a bold trad route with a belayer who was very uncomfortable about the situation. And it was a really, really dodgy experience that we had. I won't go into detail. Now's not the place, but let's just say it proved to me something which I've always really known, which is that you've got to have a belayer who's giving you the right vibes. Now, equally, you don't want some belayer going, yeah, high five, dude. Yeah, you're so rad. Oh, man, you're going to crush it. You don't want that type of shit. That is no good, right? You just want a belayer who's chilled, positive, who's, reflecting your energy back to you, and who kind of gets it. So yeah, I guess I was clearly like, the obvious person for that task, but. And because I believe, so much in Adam and in his ability, and I know that he's not going to take on a task like that, like sort of lightheartedly, without fully embracing it. So I've got total confidence in him. But nonetheless, I must say, the night before, it did kind of dawn on me that, what we were going to go and do. And the trouble is with that last move of Lexicon is almost maybe no matter what you do as a belayer, you're not a magician. You can't reverse the forces of gravity. You can't, that with all the will in the world, you saw how close Steve McClure came to hitting the ground, and he weighs like much less than Adam, and he's shorter and a taller, and yet there's still another hard move to go. The last dynamic move is a move higher than Steve got to. So there's a possibility that if Adam had messed up that last move, something really, really bad could have happened. And even if it hadn't been my fault as such, I'm doing an inverted commas sign there, I would no doubt feel the weight of, I would feel responsible for that for the rest of my life. And also, crumbs, every life is equal, but nonetheless, we can't avoid the facts. And the facts are, he's the most famous climber on the planet, and I had his life in my hands.
And not only that, he's a husband and a father.
Yeah.
You are.
Yeah. All those things. But I had to just flip it back and go, look, don't let this. It was almost, it was almost overwhelming for me. But I had to just be, had to do what I would do if it was me. Well, when it was me climbing the route, which is you have to take emotion out of it. You have to be very, very practical about the task at hand. And I was like, is he good enough to get up to that last move, the really dangerous move? You're damn right he is. And in some ways, that's the problem. He's good enough to climb into the dangerous position. So then the next question is
is he good enough to get himself out of that position? In other words, if he gets there, can he either do the move, or if he thinks that he can't, rather than fluffing it, can he maybe reverse one move and shout take, and I pull him off and he falls 25 meters, but he hopefully misses the ground? Could that work as well? Yeah, that could work. And that's how we spoke about the route beforehand. What we couldn't have was any sort of, it's the classic Yoda, isn't it? It's the do or don't do. There is no try. And that's the way we kind of spoke about the route beforehand, and that was the way he approached it. And sure enough, it all worked out good.
Incredible, Neil. Well, you made this careful, informed assessment Adam's abilities before agreeing to be his partner, his belayer. And like you said, maybe he is the only person or one of the very, very few people who are capable of this thing.
Mm-hmm.
However, as he was climbing and reaching near, let's say the no-fall zone, I'm sure there was a lot going on in your mind, Neil. Was there any point of doubt? Yeah, you're so articulate, Neil. Can you? Yeah.
I think the toughest part was the bit beforehand. When it's just the pressure is just building and building and building, and you're still all going through a little bit of is this like kind of like a pantomime, or is this actually really happening? It's like the minute you touch the rock, it was such a relief, because it's like we're no longer thinking about it. There's no more anticipation. It's actually happening now. And really, I mean, when Adam, as soon as he touched the rock, I know what he's going to be thinking. He's just going to be thinking, get the next hole perfectly, do this move, put this piece of protection in. Just process. But equally for me as a belayer, I'm thinking, I've just got to keep the rope exactly the right tension. I've got to play out the slack now, readjust it, check that I'm stood in check that my stance is stable, like I'm just thinking about not messing it up. And, but once I got into that headspace, again, as a belayer, I was more process focused, and then before we knew it, he was on the top. So you're not like whilst he's climbing having all these like wild emotions. You're just focusing on your job that you've got to do.
I know that there is this movie in the making of Adam's climb, so I don't want to steal that thunder early. Can you take a moment and reflect on what you noticed in Adam? I'm guessing it was more than just, oh, of course I know I could do it kind of expression. I'm guessing it was more complex than that.
Well, yeah, he's of course this thing we hear in climbing all the time, or you see it on social media. Oh, so and so, they're so strong, such a crusher. Adam Andre, he's so strong, but like calling him strong is just selling him short. I mean, I'm not saying he's weak, but he'll be the first person to tell you that there's a lot of people who are stronger than him in terms of, raw output or, strength on a hangboard or something. But what is quite mind blowing is the intellect of this guy. I mean, his ability to store complex beta, his brain is like a computer. I mean, a route like Lexicon is pretty complicated. It's not like following pink holes on a climbing wall. I mean, just actually getting each handhold right is really intricate. If you watch the film of me doing it, you'll see Dave McLeod talking about this. And he says, if you get this hold, it's like arranging your fingers in the keys of a piano. If you get this hold exactly right, you can just about use it. If you get it fractionally wrong, if your finger's like a millimeter out or 2 mil out, suddenly this hold is really bad. So just how you arrange your hands on the hold is one thing. And then it's like the foot beta, the different, like the movements. It's like there's so much to put together. Yet he just, he'd obviously watched the video of me climbing it. And then it just took me to show him, like, actually like on the piece of rock itself. He was obviously viewing from a distance. He wasn't like on the route with me. He was 3 routes across, but I'm going, this is this hold Adam, this is this move, this is the bit where you step through, this is the bit where you switch to the undercut, this is the side pull. Be very careful to put your thumb here, not there. This is the, and I'm talking about it all like this. And it just goes in. And then when he comes to climb it, it's like a robot. It's like a total machine. It's like bang, 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 bang. A friend of mine who was there, Craig Matheson, said he's like a metronome. It was like bum, 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 bum. Like he's climbing on this beat. There's none of this like how, anyone else would be, oh, I'm not sure about this hold, or I'm going to just change my grip. Oh, where's the next hold? Oh, is it that one? No, it's that one. Oh, no, I've got this foothold. Oh, I need to just, my foot's slipping. I'm going to readjust it. Like, there's none of this. It's literally just bang, 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 bang. Oh, he's on the top. It's just, it's magic.
It's ridiculous,
magic.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, all that we hear about and see about Adam's abilities to visualize routes sounds like all of that came to bear on this climb, because yes, people who have seen him climb or his videos of him trying to onside of flash routes, I think they would attest that like he gets on these routes that he's never been on, and it seems like he's attempting a rehearsed red point. At the same time, thank you for acknowledging that. Yes, he all said and done. He's not a robot, right? He's human, and
But
he just
is a
puts
human,
insane levels of preparation. I mean, just like you have done. Coming back to you, Neil. So now Adam has done this climb. I wonder, like, even though you thought it was possible for Adam to do this thing in the style, that's why you decided to support him. Did it still shift something for you, like just about climbing and about like human performance?
Did it? Sorry, say again. Did it shift something for
I'm
me?
wondering, like,
I mean, yeah.
yeah,
Like, obviously, it was this incredible, like people who were there when the first, when Roger Bannister did the first 4-minute mile, or like, the first sub 100 meters. There was this definite sense of you've just seen the bar be totally raised in front of your eyes, that you. So there was that, but I've said a lot, and I also feel like I do want to leave some stuff open-ended for people to go and watch this film. And, in many ways, I haven't touched upon the most important part for me, or the bit that you might not predict, is how Adam was after doing this route, how he reacted. It's almost like, place your bets, answers on a postcard. Did he go really quiet and subdued? Did he burst into tears? Did he rejoice? Like, what did he do? Like, how do you think? Because remember, he's the greatest, and he's done a lot of hard climbs. Was it just another day at the office for him? Just another. Because when I climbed with him on Gritstone, there was some routes that he went up, which I was expecting a quite big reaction. He was a bit like, oh yeah, reminded me of the Czech sandstone I did. Like, on to the next one. So yeah, it's that was the interesting part, and so I do urge people to watch the film, which is going to come out very soon.
Yeah, folks who are with us in this conversation, take this as a teaser. Go watch. I think you should watch it this order. Watch Neil's climb first, his video, and then that link will be on the show notes. And then I'm not sure if Adam's video will be out by this podcast, but yeah, I think that's the order. Okay, Neil. One of the things that I think fascinates a lot of us is you have done some of your hardest climbing later in life. And like you said earlier, after 45. So why do you think that happened, Neil? I just leave it open-ended.
I can summarize what I think were the key 3 areas, maybe 4, maybe 5, maybe no. I'll try and. There's so many components to this. I'd say in the top 3 or 4 are in no particular order, and they're probably of equal importance. One was discovering the importance of nutrition. I can go back to. We can go back into that in detail in a minute if you want. The other was understanding how not to get injured, which was a combination of really understanding the importance of antagonist training the opposite muscles, but also just really feeling like I'd bossed down the kind of the structure and sequencing of my training and the progression of load and when I needed to come off the gas and when I could ramp it up. And, just knowing how my body responded to climbing-based training. That was the second one. The third one was moving from London near to 2 amazing climbing areas, Yorkshire Limestone for sport climbing and the Lake District for trad. The fourth one, I don't know why I've said this last because it could be the most powerful of all, was not caring. Was not caring about like feeling like I'd done enough, like I didn't have anything to prove to myself as such, and that I was out for the fun of it, like the beginner fun of it, and not. When I say not caring, I mean just not getting stressed out if I failed, and just being happy to come back another day and another and another and another and another, and thinking, well, maybe I'll never do it, but that doesn't matter. Like just being released from that kind of prison of expectation. That was massive. And then probably lots of other small things, but I'd say those are the. If I list too many things, it's almost no point creating a list, is there? It's like
Yeah.
like those were the 4 biggest things.
Neil, out of those things you shared, I am the most fascinated with the very last point, which is this attitude that you brought of not caring.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, it seems almost paradoxical to, let's say, us aging, enduring athletes, because sometimes the older you get, the more you realize that time is running out. In your 20s, maybe even your 30s, you think that life is forever, and then you hit 40s, and then you feel like you have this compressed time and
Mm-hmm.
physical capacity to make your mark, right? So can you speak about this mindset? How did you arrive at this mindset? Was it conscious? Was it accidental? Was it just something else?
So I went on the quest to climb 8C because I thought I might be running out of time at 45. And when I started the quest, I was so shocked by what happened. What actually happened was this kind of, if you like, life deadline, which I thought was bearing down on me and coming closer, was actually just it was moving further away. It went off into the distance. I couldn't even see it. It was like, I've still got so much bandwidth for improvement here. I'm not even close to reaching the plateau. And I actually felt quite relaxed about it. It was like, there was me thinking, I better climb 8C before I run out of time. It's like, well, actually, I could climb 8C plus, which I did, and I could climb 9A, but I didn't do that. Instead, I climbed E11. But I know this sounds like could have, would have, should have means nothing in sport. It's like it's only about what you did. But I one of the reasons I didn't go chase 9A was because I just had this feeling that I could have done it. I did E11 instead, and you have to make your choices. Doing both might have been quite tough, but I feel also that I could do 9A now if it weren't for some of the external factors, things that are going on in my life, which I mentioned earlier. One thing's for sure, I was going to climb 9A, I'd have to have a level, like a blank slate. I'd have to have everything in its place, because, I'd have to get back to really living like an athlete again. But I know the process. I think I've gone off on a tangent. I can't remember the question now, but the thing that definitely blew my mind was that it wasn't like this awful feeling that as I was chasing it, it was slipping away. It was like, oh, actually, yeah, this is fine. I'm going to achieve this, and I'm probably going to go beyond that as well.
I mean, it makes sense. Yeah, you went and climbed this 8C, again, an elite grade in rock climbing, and then you just found yourself that there was still more room.
Mm-hmm.
How did you come to that realization? Because, like, friends, it means a lot that you're here. I pour a ton of heart into the show. The research, the interviews, the editing, it's all me, trying to share stories that matter. If Ageless Athlete has ever made you feel seen, inspired you, or just kept you company on a long drive, or better, over a run or a bike ride, I would be so grateful if you considered supporting it. Even a small amount helps keep it going, helps keep bringing the show to you for free. You can chip in at buymeacoffee.com/agelessathlete. Again, buymeacoffee.com/agelessathlete. You can find the link on the show notes as well. Thank you for listening and for being part of this. Yeah, as we get older, like, you sometimes find that, hey, you can't do as many pull-ups as you used to. It takes longer to recover.
Well, I
What
did
was your
considerably. Well,
revelation?
I did considerably more pull-ups in my late 40s than I could in my 20s, and I used to train pull-ups in my 20s. Do you know what I mean? I used to hang a lot of weight from my waist, and I used to drink protein shakes, and I used to train pull-ups. But my best effort in my 20s, when I had testosterone racing around my system, was I managed 2.5, 2.75 one-arm pull-ups. At the age of 47, was it 48, I did 6 one-arm pull-ups. And the main reason for this is, funny enough, do you know what? I actually got, actually, I'm not going to go off on a tangent. A troll, like an online hater, accused me of taking steroids because they just couldn't quite believe what I was doing, and if you want to know if you want to know the answer, the truth, it's pretty simple. It's low inflammation eating, like eating foods which don't cause inflammation in the body. All the stuff you read, all the stuff we see on social media or we see everywhere, it's all about, oh, this type of protein shake, whey protein versus collagen, and it's all this talk about protein. For me, this stuff doesn't make any difference. It's like when I'm following my nutrition plan, I'm eating enough dietary protein anyway, so I don't really feel like I need to supplement with protein. But what makes all the difference is eating, for example, if I'm eating carbohydrates, eating carbs that are very low on the glycemic index scale, and also cutting out things like dairy. Obviously, all processed foods are out, but basically eating, because what you come to realize when you dial into this is that when you just eat, like, let's call it a normal diet without actually paying attention to this, you're eating a lot of these inflammatory food sources, and a lot of your energy, which you should be using to recover from training, is being used to reduce inflammation in the body before you can recover from your training, thus increasing the length of the recovery time. As soon as you cut all those foods out and you start eating like low inflammation foods, I just recover twice as quick, 3 times as quick. No, I'm exaggerating, twice as quick. And I also noticed all sorts of other things. I feel more flexible, like I can suddenly do the splits. My body's looser, and this is like, because people sort of think, oh yeah, Gresham and his nutrition, oh, it's about losing weight. And look, I won't lie, when I get on my strategy, I do lose weight because I'm eating well and healthily. But I would suggest that the main value in what the nutrition strategy that I use is improving my recovery. which means I can do more training and, more training within a given time period. And, from what I understand, that's kind of similar to what performance enhancing drugs do for you, right? But you can just get that from nutrition. And the irony is that I was recovering almost twice as quickly in my late 40s as I was in my 20s as a result of what I eat. Now, I arguably should eat this type of diet all year round, and people like Dave McLeod do. Um, in his case, it's for other reasons. He finds that that type of eating is very good for it improves his mental health. And I agree with that as well. My mood is better when I eat this, when I follow my nutrition strategy. There's a spin-off benefit there. But, I actually find that it works better if I cycle my nutrition and I have an off period when I just, eat cakes and drink wine and just let my hair down a bit, and that kind of coincides with a period when I'm not particularly pushing my training. I'm not pursuing a performance goal. I'm just being a dad, hanging out with the family, all that kind of stuff. But then, as the next cycle comes around and the next project is kind of, I set a timeline for the next project, then I go through a cycle of this and I time it so that I switch from, I start off with a balanced macro. Sorry, I'm probably talking a lot about nutrition, aren't I? But
No,
for me,
I think this is worth
it's just
a deep
so
dive.
important.
Yeah.
It's so important. Like when I start off training, I'm following a balanced macro, if you call it in inverted commas, like a normal sort of but healthy diet. Then as the performance period approaches, I'll switch to a low carb diet with really low inflammation protocols. And then when I start to come up to the performance period, which is either a trip or a project, then I switch to keto. And keto just works unbelievably well for me. Not everybody does. Of course, I'm not coming on here advising everyone to go keto. You have to, with nutrition more than anything, you have to experiment, and you have to find out what works for you. And a lot of people won't get on with it. But for me, keto is like, it's magic. It's like rocket fuel. It's incredible. I mean, I climb my climbing will vary by, get this, 4 grades throughout this cycle. Like I will be able to on-site or flash grades that I can't project when I'm off this, like when I'll be like, flashing a well, no, do I exaggerate? No, it will vary 3 grades and it will vary between 3 and 4 grades. And sometimes at the end of the cycle, I can flash grades that I couldn't project at the start of the cycle.
Neil, this is, truly fascinating. You also coach clients. And normally when we work with a climbing coach, nutrition may come up, but it's not like the centerpiece. So does it become a part of your conversation with your clients?
So it doesn't, and I have to be professional. I'm not qualified, and but I do work closely with. The person who put me onto this, a chap called Glenn Burrows. I mean, I've spoken about him extensively before in podcasts that I did with Dave McLeod, and Glenn I feel like I owe him the last 10 years of my climbing career because he put me onto all this. And I was one of the biggest skeptics. I was one of the biggest cynics out there. I was like, oh, this just sounds like, mumbo jumbo from the diet industry, designed to make you part with your money. It's not going to make any difference. And he was like, wow, with respect, he's like, you're quite out of touch, and he said to me, how much you bothered about the next 10 years of your climbing? Do you still see yourself being a pro athlete? And I was like, well, I don't really know. And he said, well, give this a go. And I followed him and I took his advice and it blew my mind. And he's helped a lot of my clients. So I've passed clients on to him. But in the end, what we did was we produced, so apologies if this is the bit when it looks like I'm trying to sell my product, but genuinely, this is something that I believe in so passionately about. Glenn and I realized that this information just needed to be in the public domain, and we needed to just get information, which is all this information, you can Google it. It's all stuff that's been out there for not even new. It's been out there for best part of 2 decades. But the thing is, it hasn't been collated into a single source that's speaking to climbers in the language that they, climbers don't want to read but some climbers, people like Dave McLeod, do want to read endless research papers, but most people just want to read something that's fairly easygoing, speaking in a light-hearted tone, lots of practical tips. It tells you what to do. And we put together a guide, and we sell it on my website as a PDF. It's called Introduction to Nutrition for Climbers. And we've been bowled over by the amount of the positive feedback that we've had, because the trouble is, you have to be very careful how you speak about nutrition publicly in any sphere, but especially in climbing, because there is an issue of eating disorders in climbing, and anyone who feels remotely susceptible to that, or anyone who has an illness or a condition that's related to diet, should go to a dietitian, of course. But at the same time, there's a huge number of people who don't fall into that category, who just want to read good information that's practical and geared towards climbers. Now, this is the Ageless Athlete podcast, right? And one thing I said to you right at the very start is something I'm going to repeat, and that is that I strongly believe that this stuff is more important for older athletes. I think because when you're younger, like hormonally, you're at an advantage. The older you get, the cleverer you have to be with this, and the more you have to deploy these various acts. This is what's at the heart of our guide. And the problem is, of course, it's not a one size fits all model. You're not going to buy my nutrition guide, and it's not going to say eat this, eat this, eat this, and don't eat that. And that's the strategy. I'm afraid it's not as simple as that. You have to, but what it teaches you to do is experiment using these principles, and hopefully it enables people to find the strategy that works for them. Well, it does, because that's the feedback that we receive.
Certainly, Neil. I have two follow-up questions here. One is, from what I know about the keto diet, and many years ago, I think I did experiment with it. It didn't last very long.
Okay. Well, there you go. You see?
Yeah. No, maybe I was not as focused and as goal oriented, but my other blocker was that I gave up eating meat several years ago. So I'm like plant-based. So is following that kind of diet still possible for people who are not eating meat?
I think if you eat fish, it's just about possible. But if you don't eat fish, it's extremely difficult. It's really limiting. But, again, our guide isn't just about getting people on keto. And it's like, well, if you're a vegetarian, sorry, we can't help. It's not about that. It's like, as I say, we talk about balanced macro strategies. We talk about low carb. I think you can adopt a low carb, which, if you like, is call it a less strict version of a keto strategy if you're a vegetarian. And you can certainly experience the advantages of low inflammation eating, which is what I was talking about earlier. So you could certainly follow a balanced macro strategy, which is just the usual dietary composition, or you could go for a low carb strategy, which is slightly higher in fat, slightly lower in carbs, but it's like, you could call it a less strict version of the keto diet. And if you do that, you can also bring in the advantages of low inflammation eating, which is for me the key part of it.
And Neil, you have been very focused all along as a professional athlete on planning these cycles of rest, of balance, of performance. So for people listening, for the everyday athlete out there who doesn't have quite the same periodized schedule, what kind of diet would you recommend for, like, let's say, not apex performance, but just like sustained performance to be able to?
Well, I would say, I would say the low carb. I mean, I really have to qualify here that nutrition, more than training, more than anything, you've got to find what works for you. But it's got to the point now where Glenn and I have worked with a lot of people, and we've got a pretty good feeling for what, I don't want to snooker myself here by saying something that I'll be held to account for, but I can say for sure that you would, as I said about keto, it's probably more likely to not work than it is to work. And then here's you saying that you tried it and it didn't work for you. That doesn't surprise me. As I say, it works brilliantly for me. But and keto is also less effective for women generally as well. But the low carb strategy, I've hardly ever seen not worked. And low carb is effectively, it's like keto during the day, that you eat carbs. Well, there's various interpretations of it, but the one that Glenn got me doing, which I think is fantastic, is low carb with what we call carb backloading, which is when you eat carbs in the evening. And this is very like contrary to I was brought up on this whole, carbs in the morning to fuel your day, but then no carbs in the evening. Now, like, for me, that's just hell on earth. That just does not work at all. The idea behind the low carb with backloading strategy is that you run on fats during the day. Beauty of running on fats is that you experience these very like even sustained energy levels. Like any type of carbohydrate, even if it's a low GI carbohydrate, is going to give you a bit of an insulin spike, and you're going to get a bit of a slump off that. So, obviously, if you're drinking Coca-Cola and eating Mars bars, the day's going to be a total roller coaster. But even if you're eating clean carbs, your energy levels still ebb and flow. But if you're eating fats, you get this sustained, steady flow of energy during the day. And then carbohydrates at night, you think, well, why would that be? Why would you want to take on energy before you go to bed? Like, well, the answer is because that's when you recover. Like, you recover at night. And so the carbohydrates assist the recovery process and like boost up that, they spike that anabolic curve. So, while you're asleep in your bed, that's when you're getting stronger. And I've found that strategy to be that I could follow that strategy all year round, no problem. And I kind of do. I don't like to deviate from that too much because it just makes me feel so good. And it doesn't take any real willpower to follow it. Whereas strict keto does take some willpower, I won't lie.
I'm guessing people who are listening to this are probably like, sighing in relief that they can continue eating rice and pasta for dinner. But I'm guessing it's also not quite as simple. So, Neil, a couple more things to cover with you here. Are you able to stay on a little bit longer?
Yeah, I can. Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Appreciate it. One other thing that I find fascinating, Neil, is that you have said that becoming a father gave you new focus and even helped your climbing. And that kind of perspective shift is so powerful. But if someone hasn't had a big life event like that, any advice on finding that new stoke or clarity, without waiting for a life event to shake things up?
Yeah. Well, okay. So for me, I will just clarify. It was two things. One was becoming a father. You suddenly realize that actually it doesn't matter how hard you climb or not. The other was just watching the greats in action. Maybe this is a more helpful part of the answer to the question. I used to be that guy who was getting really stressed out with failure and putting a lot of pressure on myself and self-sabotaging because I was just I got to the point where I'd stopped enjoying it, and that's why I stopped climbing hard projects and moved on to other styles of climbing, more, if you like, adventurous or fun styles of climbing, because I just couldn't hack the pressure of hard projects. So what I did was, when I returned to hard project climbing, I saw people like Steve McClure on the crag and Chris Sharma and these guys who are just, when they fall off, they're not spitting the dummy and having some big tantrum. They're like, oh, that was a fun go. I tried my best. I'll come down, have a rest. They're enjoying talking to their friends. They're enjoying being in the nice place. They're genuinely enjoying being in the nice place, even though they're trying this super hard project, and they're enjoying doing these. And they say things like, "Oh, it's better than being indoors," and like the moves on this project are so cool. I'm enjoying doing them. And they're just, whether they're doing this like they're doing it as a hack, or whether they're just doing it naturally, I honestly don't even know. I can't believe it's something that I haven't actually asked. If I asked Steve, I know exactly what Steve would say. He would never confess that it was a hack. He'd say, "Oh no, that's just who I am. That's just, yeah, it's like being out on the crag." That's what Steve would say. And it's as simple as that, right? You've got to get back in touch with those reasons why you started. You started because you just like being out on the crag. You like the feeling of the movement. You liked being in nature. You liked being with your friends. You just got to get back in touch with that. We lose that. The obsession with performance just takes over and just sabotages the whole thing. So you have to just try and get back to those, I think especially as we get older, because a day spent on the crag having a tantrum and getting stressed because you didn't do your route, it's a day wasted.
100%. And yeah, somehow the greats, and I think of you as part of them, are able to tap into that feeling of joy, whether they're trying easy things or hard things. They bring maybe this enjoyment of the process that sometimes we lose
Mm-hmm.
when we have
Mm-hmm.
been doing something so long. So I think your advice is very heeded. It is not easy, but the rest of us need to figure out how to, yeah, just enjoy going out and finding the right kind of people to go out with and find that stoke. Neil, you have been coaching now for a few decades,
Since
and I
1993.
amazing. And I remember when I started climbing in the early 2000s, when I was like kind of just soaking up whatever information I could find. I remember reading your articles from back when there was really little information out there.
That's right.
Can you talk about maybe a couple of like principles or things with how your training has evolved? Things that you believe or you advise people to like double down on, or maybe some things that
Hello, friends. Just a quick break. This is not an ad. If you have been enjoying these conversations, I would love for you to subscribe to my newsletter. It is where I go deeper, sharing stories, reflections, and behind the scenes insights that don't always make it into the podcast. I write about what I'm learning from elite athletes and how to stay ageless in body and mind. If you have ever wanted a thoughtful, inspiring read that ties it all together: training, aging, mindset, and awe. You will love this. You can find the link in the show notes or just head to agelessathlete.co. Again, www.agelessathlete.co, that is, to sign up. And yeah, just a couple of emails a month, and you can unsubscribe anytime. Absolutely no spam ever. Okay, back to the show.
don't work.
So my manifesto as a coach is to the people I work with, I want them to be kind to themselves and enjoy their climbing, and to understand that sometimes the harder you chase something, the more it moves away from you. And things ebb and flow, and by kind of making that steady commitment over time, you will get there in the end, even if there's setbacks on the way. There could be, meaning that you might not get your project, or you might get a finger tweak or something like that. But in the end, it all balances out. And I just see too many people chasing things too hard, getting frustrated, getting injured, getting burnt out. This is not the way to go. We're all under it. a lot of pressure at the moment in our private lives, climbing needs to be the antidote to that, not something that's making it worse. And I also believe so strongly that the approach to training for climbing is holistic. You can't just, it's easier to get tunnel vision on things like finger strength because you can just measure it. You know, you can get one of these pickup trainers and lift up weights and you can feel your finger, you can measure your fingers getting stronger. Will that make you a better climber on its own? No, you've got to be doing all the other stuff as well. And, you know, like to remember that the best climbers like Adam aren't necessarily the strongest. They're the whole package. They've got the movement, you know, they've got Jedi-like ability to read sequences and retain beats. You know, footwork as accurate as a ballerina. You know, these are all the things that we want, not just this quest for finger strength, which we see on social media. And sorry, this is a rather long manifesto, isn't it? But the main thing that I do in the training plans that I set for people is I divide the training up into chunks, and this avoids repeating the same thing over and over again, which is what most climbers, without a training plan, a lot of climbers, they just do the same training over and over and they plateau. But if you divide the training up into like bite-sized chunks, give each chunk long enough to have a chance to work, and then when you start to plateau, you move on and you introduce the load progressively over time. And you make sure that all the strength and endurance work is accompanied with skill-related goals, by which I mean stuff like focus on this aspect of technique when you're climbing, focus on this aspect of mindset when you're climbing. Like, don't just think about the physical side of it. Constantly give yourself a steer when it comes to tricks and tactics. I'd say that's probably about my manifesto done.
No, that's a great manifesto. I'm wondering, Neil, if you may have a story or two, we don't need real names, of maybe an athlete, let's say an old athlete who came to you because they were, battling a few of the different things, injuries or maybe psych, and maybe you helped them through a transformation.
Oh, I mean, just so many. Yeah. I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know where to start, but I mean, there was a chap. I'm not going to name him, even though I know he wouldn't mind. But I haven't checked first. I'd like to have named him, but I should be professional. And he came to me in his late 40s and put on a lot of weight, and he really thought his climbing performance really dropped off. He thought he'd had his best days, and gave him a nutrition guide. The weight came off. Then we started talking about like goal setting, and he was thinking that coming back to do 7A would just be like an ultimate. And he'd climbed 7A like 10 years ago or something, and he didn't imagine he could ever climb it again. And of course he's now on sighting 7A, isn't he? And he's red pointed 7B plus, and he just did he's red pointing 7B plus pretty consistently, and he's just done his first 7 stone, and it just goes to, but this is just judging it purely on the statistics, on the grades that this guy's achieved. But the thing that gives me the most pleasure is, I follow most of the people that I train on social media, is that he's just having so much fun. He's just really enjoying it, and he's just got this, the thing that I know that you promote so strongly in this podcast, is that this feeling that like, wow, you can still do it. And moreover is that the party isn't going to be ending anytime soon, So
that's a great story, Neil. And I think a story that many people listening to this podcast can relate to, because, they are likely closer to this person than they are to Adam Ondra. Maybe one or two like key breakthroughs, like broadly, like what was it, like just the mental part, or was it like refining their training or something else that helped them like really exceed maybe even the goals they set out for themselves?
Well, I think in the case of this person, it was the holistic approach. It was the nutrition. His technique was actually pretty good, to be fair. But he needs to get a lot stronger as well. He lost a lot of strength, the endurance to go with that, but also just I think mindset stuff. He was fine about taking leader falls, but he just lost so much confidence. So just helping him to just really believe in himself again, because that's the key part in all this. Is that having
I,
that belief as the engine.
yes, the belief. Yes, I mean, there's so much. There's so much wisdom that's packed into all your years of coaching and working with athletes. One other, I thought, example we could touch on is, we just had Rob, Rob Matheson on the podcast, still sending bold trad at 74. And he credits a lot of his ability to the work that you and he have done together. So what was it like coaching someone like Rob? Like, it's funny, one of the things that Rob told me was, like, I have like janky, I have like a shoulder injury that I have been trying to manage. And one of the things Rob was saying was like how he doesn't do any pull-ups. He's like, no, you should do like those rows, on cables or something. So maybe that is just like a kind of a tactical thing. But yeah, can you talk about like your approach to somebody like Rob?
I think what I'm going to say here might surprise you. Coaching Rob was no different to coaching anyone else. If I'd never been able to actually see him and see that he looks like an older guy, if I'd just, like only ever spoken to him on the phone, say, or I'd seen video of him climbing and hadn't seen his face, there's no difference to anyone else. And I think that's the magic of it. Sure, he's got his weaknesses, he's half crimp, he needed to do some work on that, needed to troubleshoot that a bit. He had a grumbly upper back, like sort of rhomboid type injury that needed a little bit of careful handling. Just sounds like the next climber to me. I'm not aware that this guy's 74. He could be 24. He's certainly got the outlook of a 24-year-old. I don't see. I didn't have to, manage this guy. I didn't go to this guy. Oh, you're 74. Oh, maybe you should just do a few stretches and a few push-ups and just go and do a few 6As at the wall. I trained him like I'd train anyone else.
Yes, that is true. Even though, yes, some of us would be hoping for some kind of a magic bullet, but no, I think it is exactly that. Like Rob or anybody else.
I've just given you the magic bullet. That was the magic bullet. And that's why I answered it that way. That's the positive message. You're not going to have some coach like making these. You see, I wrote those articles in the, I don't know if you ever saw what I wrote on this subject in the early North, so Rock and Ice magazine, when I was their correspondent. I wrote these totally demotivating training articles saying, the older you get, the less you should do. Oh, you shouldn't train strength because you might get a finger injury. Oh, don't do long endurance sessions because you won't recover, because your recovery's like totally gone. Like, in fact, you might as well just give up. I wrote those articles. I was wrong. I wrote those articles because there was no data. There were no Rob Mathesons around to prove that like climbers are like in that film, that film with Brad Pitt, Benjamin Button, like climbers keep getting better as they get older. I didn't know that back then. I just went on what they were saying in other sports. I looked at the research, you look at all these depressing decline curves, and I just applied that to climbing. But I am so glad that I was so wrong, and I'm the living proof of that in my own climbing, and so are all the older athletes that I've worked with. And that's why I'm quite proud to say that I didn't treat Rob Matheson differently to how I would treat anyone else. Like, sure, I gave him the right amount of work, like, and the overall amount of load to suit him, but not because of his age, because he's who he is, and like some climbers will tell me they can train 3 days in a row, no problem. Some climbers will say to me, they have to go day on, day off. Some will say they can do 2 days on, 1 day, like everybody's different. And it's more just down to individuality than age. I don't particularly see the pattern. I don't see an age-related pattern. Like I've noticed, that a lot of the people come to me of all ages who say that they've tried to follow some crazy plan that they heard about that, like, Alex Megos was doing, or like some top superhero climber was doing. They tried to follow this plan and they got overtrained and they got shut down. But they didn't say that because of their age. They just, like, it's just genetic susceptibility. So I think we all have to find, I think we all have to find the right rhythm and tempo for our training. And this is something that I try and do with every obviously it's a key thing that I do with everybody who I train, but I don't make some like sweeping assumption. Oh, you're 74. I'm going to give you 1.5 hour training session a week. I don't do that.
This one thing that you said, Neil, I am tempted to steal it, which I think is so powerful, that it is not your age, it is your individuality.
Mhm.
And I think it goes back to just the assumptions we make about what happens with aging, that trainers like you and athletes like Rob are completely debunking. You have been in this game a long time, both as a coach, as an athlete. What is still exciting or unknown for you, if there is something out there?
So much. I just love the fact that, I believe in other sports, we're now getting close to the point where AI can just write you this training program. Like, I believe that, I've been wrong about many things over the years, but one thing I'd like to think that I'm right about is that we are nowhere near the point where we're ready to surrender the controls to machines when it comes to something as human and nuancy as training for climate. It's actually quite scary when you try and get, if you ask ChatGPT for a training plan, it will give you something that it looks scarily good, yet there'll be something like seriously wrong with the kind of absolute core of it that you won't necessarily notice because it's dressed up with all the right language. It's like a total smiling assassin. So, I I think that, like, we're so we're so far away from having all the answers or using science to give us all the answers. And we see a lot of pseudoscience as well in climbing, and people think, and I also see this quite, in my opinion, like misguided approach where people will say, if something hasn't been studied, it's not real, whereas, like, we've seen a lot of good climbers doing a lot of things over time, which haven't necessarily been proven or studied, but which clearly work. You know, it's very fashionable to say, oh yeah, but there's no study on it, so that's just not even a thing. And it's like, well, if you've been around the block as many times as me, you'll know full well that this particular thing actually does work. So when we coach, we're coaching from a combination of, our own climbing experience, the people that we've worked with. And that's the biggest thing. It's all about the amount of time you spend working with people. But then you're cross-referencing that with the science, but you're not suddenly abandoning everything you know just because one study says X or Y. Because the thing is, most of these studies have long lists of caveats and limitations, and most of them are really narrow. They'll study like one thing, like finger strength, but they won't tell you how finger strength fits into an overall training plan with all the other different components. The only way you can really get a feel for this is by coaching over a long period. And it's all about pattern recognition. It's all about, understanding that, you see a set of you see a particular climber and then you think, oh yeah, I've seen someone exactly like you before. In fact, I've seen another 20 people like you before. And some of them I tried this on and it didn't work so well. But some of them I tried that on and it worked brilliantly. So I'm going to do that with you, you know. And it's like you have to train a lot of people in order to be able to sort of spot those sort of patterns. And the way I see it is there's no, you know, we couldn't be further from a one size fits all model. We have lots of different coaches approaching this in lots of different ways, which is fantastic. And it's great for the consumer out there, people who are looking for training. You know, you can try a certain coach, see if you like their approach. Even if you like their approach, it often makes sense to move on and try someone else. But yeah, I'm just so glad that it's not. I don't know if I've even answered your question here, Kush. I might have gone off on a tangent, but I'm just glad that when you look at like swimming training and cycle training, it's just like punch in your metrics, get out your plan, and off you go. You know, climbing could not be further from that at this current point in time.
Yeah, that rings true. There is just so much potential for recovery on the training end of climbing at the least, because yes, the training has, I mean, yes, there have been pioneers like you and others, you know, who have been creating information for us. But overall, the science in climbing still seems primitive compared to many sports for all kinds of reasons. I am not sure where you are with your coaching. Are you currently taking clients, Neil? And if people want to maybe avail of your services, how can they find you?
Well, thank you for asking. And I am taking clients now, and I'm so excited about this because I took I've just taken 7 months out from offering any type of coaching because I've just done an extensive research project. I've got all this data that I've collected over 3 decades. I've trained over 3,000 climbers. I just couldn't believe it. I was like, this must be some sort of mistake. And I did all these spreadsheets, and it was 3,000.
Wow.
And those were the successful ones, you know. And there was some that I didn't have data from, but you know, I had all this data, and I just thought, I'm going to use this to actually kind of see if I can see patterns in my own methodology and see if I can use this to actually improve the way that I structure training plans. And I collaborated with a friend of mine who's an analyst, and we've just found out some really, really cool things about the actual methodology for compiling training plans, because there's not much research into this. You know, there's a lot of, as I said, these like narrow studies into the individual components, but not much in the way of like studying the whole beast, the whole collective thing of producing training plans. So I'm back in business. I'm offering training plans. They're available at my website, which is neilgreshamtraining.com. I do all the plans myself. I pride myself on that. I don't have an admin assistant. Well, I have an admin assistant who helps me with correspondence, but I actually, you know, I do all the training plans myself. And I just love it. I mean, I love, you know, each climber, everybody answers the questionnaire differently, you know, and you go, oh, well, these aspects are similar. These ones are a little bit different, you know, and it's like, making a training plan, it's like kind of mixing from a palette, you know, or maybe it's more like doing mixing sound audio. You know, you've got all these different sliders, you've got, you know, all the different grips, all the different like types of strengths that you're training, and you're turning some of these sliders up, and you're turning other sliders down, and you're just, you know, overall creating this like degree of balance for each individual. Yeah, that's mainly what I'm doing. And I was the first British coach to offer personalized training plans. You know, I started over a decade before anyone else. And I'm really proud that I've kept this service going. I mean, it's been a life's work for me. And I do like in-person coaching and like online calls, like consultancy, but really the engine of it are the personalized plans. And I do ones that are, you know, specific to people's needs. If you want to do like you're going trad climbing, if you're going like sport on sighting, sport red pointing, bouldering, competitions, whatever it might be, or whether you want to work weaknesses, or whether you want to prepare for a trip or a particular goal, whatever it might be, I will tune the training so that it's designed exactly for that.
Incredible, Neil. Appreciate your work in the decades that you have put in towards honing your craft. And now you have also been able to compile, distill, and offer up like all the data to people. And it sounds like you are also able to accept remote clients, given that people or climbers listening are from really all over the world, right? So if
Oh,
people
absolutely.
was
Yeah.
to work with you remotely, they can certainly avail of your services. We will put links on your website on how to connect with you.
Definitely.
And Neil, just some final, let's say, more fun questions as we round out this conversation.
Please.
Yes. What is your favorite climbing training tool you swear by?
My favorite climbing training tool, as in like a piece of equipment, or
Yeah, sure.
um, I think it would have to be my forearm extensor trainer, because that has kept me, that has kept away elbow tendonitis for the last, it must be nearly 20 years now since I've had elbow tendonitis, but I used to get that all the time. And that was the biggest thing that held me back in my 20s and 30s, or 20s and early 30s. But in my late 30s, 40s, and 50s, I've never had any elbow tendonitis. And it's because I use these forearm extensor trainers. Now, it's funny because I actually sort of, I would never get involved in a dispute with a coach online, but I had a private dispute with a particular coach who pulled me up on this and said, you know, you're saying that these extensor trainers help with tendonitis. That isn't proven. And I was like, yes, it is, mate. I've got 120 emails from clients who I've recommended these things to, and they've all said that their elbows feel a lot better as a result. I said, that's a study. As far as I'm concerned, that's proven.
Amazing. And Neil, I've heard you talk about your training with the finger extensors before, and in your case, it has been great to alleviate uh, tendonitis. But if somebody
Yeah.
like I don't have tendonitis, does it still offer utility to me?
So I can only speculate about that, but what I've also noticed is quite a few of the people who I've, and myself included, but also people who I've recommended these things to, have said that their fingers have felt stronger in a climbing sense. You know, I'm not just talking about the extensors, which are obviously used for opening the fingers. I'm talking about their flexor tendons, which are used for closing the grip and actually hanging onto holds. Now you'd think, well, why would that be? Because the extensors, the opposition muscles. Well, my theory on this is that it's because you're addressing an imbalance, and that your flexor tendons can only get so strong if you don't address the strength in your extensor tendons. And sure enough, I think, well, I'm so sure that as soon as I started training my extensors, it facilitated further strengthening of my flexor. Now, you know, this is a little bit more speculative, but I've had a lot of people say it to me. They start using extensor trainers, and almost as if by magic, their flexors get stronger. You know, there'll be a lot of coaches listening to this who are going to want to pick me apart on that, but you know, you're welcome to. I think there is definite value for everybody in using them.
Awesome, Neil. And getting this tool is a little bit simpler than trying to install, a tread wall at your house. So it's much, much simpler. So I feel like the downsides are low. And people, is there a particular one that you recommend people can find?
Well, I'm not sponsored by any company that produces them. I want to make it clear that I'm not trying to promote a particular brand, but the ones that I happen to use are the Power Fingers. They work well. the key is that you need to be able to train strength. You need to have high resistance. It's no good if you can just do like 50 or 100 reps really easily. You've got to be able to really do sets of 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 reps and find them really difficult to open so that you're actually training strength. That's the key.
Almost treat them like you would treat maybe doing a hard bouldering problem, or doing, let's say, a
Exactly.
set of deadlifts, where you're
Exactly.
trying to,
Yeah. It's bouldering for the extensors.
There you go. Perfect. A favorite way to recover after a long day out?
I don't know about favorite, but I know about let's change that to effective. Because I live in the Lake District, go and jump in a cold lake, or go and jump in a river. It's type 2 fun, but it certainly does the job.
No, that's a great reframing. But I will still actually, thanks for that. I'd still insist on my original question, but I will change that.
Okay.
I changed that, and I will say,
sorry
I
to
changed that.
rephrase the question.
No, it's all good. I love the cold plunge added tip that you shared. But I will ask a different question, maybe related, which is a favorite way to decompress things. We know of you as a father, an elite climber, a pioneer.
Just something fun to do on a rest day. Not something that actually helps you recover, but something that just makes you feel good. Oh, yeah.
Maybe it does help you recover too.
Do you know? I think it would be the same thing. I'd go to the plunge. I'd go to the river or the lake, but I'd go with my kids, and we'd take the paddleboard and a barbecue. There you go. And then it's both.
Love it. Final question, Neil, to round out this conversation, and I ask this from everybody, which is, what does ageless mean to you now?
Wow, that's a powerful question. The freedom to really be me with no strings attached, to really enjoy what I'm doing and be in the moment with it.
Short, yet profound. Neil, thank you for coming on to the show today. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. It was an honor, and I'll look forward to following the future of the show. Thank you so much, Good.
That's it, folks. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Ageless Athlete Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this show just as much as I enjoyed creating and producing it. Whether you are an athlete looking to push your limits or someone striving to maintain a healthy, active lifestyle as you age, there is always something new to learn. From Ageless Athlete, we bring you a fresh episode each and every week. If you liked what you heard, we would love it if you would take a moment to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an update. And if you really liked what you heard, please leave us a review, crush those 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever else you listen to your podcasts. It helps us reach more people who are passionate about staying strong and resilient, no matter their age. Don't forget to visit our website and leave your email so I can send you occasional insights, stories, and tips to keep you inspired and motivated on your journey. You can also follow us on Instagram at Ageless Athlete Podcast and on YouTube at Ageless Athlete Podcast as well for even more great content. All of these links are available on the show notes for this episode. This show is entirely produced by me, Kush Khandelwal, based out of California with the help of my trusted adventure pup Roger. Until next time, keep challenging yourself. Keep pushing those limits. Stay mentally and physically fit. Continue doing what you love to do. And my friends, stay ageless. Friends, this is not an ad. This is just a quick message to those amongst us who are listening to Ageless Athlete podcast for the first time. I would love it if you would hit subscribe and follow on your favorite podcast app, whether it's Apple Podcast or Spotify or Stitcher or Overcast or what have you. We bring you stories and routines and other inspiration from elites in the world of the best outdoor sports. In each episode, you will find how these athletes stay connected to the outdoors, maintain peak performance, and continue to thrive as they age. I encourage you to look through Brad episodes and listen to a couple and see if they resonate. And then, come back next week. We release an episode each week. And I am really inspired to bring you some of the best stories from the world of the outdoors. Okay, back to the show.